What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo from Pitchfork Academy here, and in this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to set up footstep sound effects that are totally dynamic and have attenuation and even spatial audio. So as you can see here, when I run around, it plays sound effects depending on which surface type I am running or walking on, and if I walk, those sound effects are much quieter compared to when I jog or when I jump and land and have a heavier footfall. Now, I did a tutorial on this about 1 year ago, but this system is a lot more scalable and a lot more malleable and also adds the attenuation and spatial audio. So over here, I've got an enemy class, which I can activate with a key on my keyboard. And as he walks and runs around at random, we can hear where he is with the spatial audio, and it will also sound much louder or quieter depending on how far away he is. So if he walks, perfect, he's walked towards us and we could not hear him. And as he walks closer, it gets louder and louder. And we've even got different attenuation settings based on which type of footfall he has. So his running and jumping can be heard from further away, and his walking, he has to be a lot closer for you to hear it. So if you're making some sort of multiplayer shooter like Ark Raiders or pretty much any multiplayer shooter where hearing other players' footsteps is super important, then this tutorial is for you. But just before we get started, guys, I'd like to invite you all to join our free and public Discord server, the Pitchfork Academy. It's a space we've created where you guys can get together and discuss our tutorials, look for help, and mix with other like-minded people. I'll leave the invite link in the description and in the pinned comment, but without further ado, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, now for the record, I'm using Unreal Engine 5.7 to record this tutorial, but everything that I'm going to show you today should work exactly the same in any version of Unreal Engine. Now I'm here in my project. Basically all I've done is create a new project using the third person template, and obviously I've changed the default level a little bit, and the other thing I've done is I've just scaled down the floor and duplicated it a few times. And then I've downloaded these textures and materials from Quixel Megascans, and literally all I've done is take the materials that come with the download and slapped them on these cubes here. And I've also just changed the scaling a little bit, made these tile a little bit less so it's a little bit bigger. I know they don't look great, but just having these different materials here on each of these cubes is all that's going to be required to play the different sound effects depending on what surface you're running on. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and import the sound effects, which you'll find freely available for download via the link in the description. And I'm just going to make a new folder for them in the content folder. So I'll right click, create a new folder, and I'll just call it SFX. And in here, I'm just going to, I'll just put them straight in this folder here. So if you download the zip and extract it, and then obviously find where it's stored on your computer, you can just highlight these and just drag them into the content browser, and it will import them like so. And just because we've got quite a few new files here that aren't saved, I'll hit save all, save selected. And the other thing we want to do is create some sound cues from these. And that just means that the cue will sort of select from the different versions of the different sound effects that we have here. So I'm going to hold Control and click the concrete sound effects here, and then I'll right click and we can create a sound cue single. And I'll just call this SC for sound cue underscore concrete. I'll select all of the grass sound effects, create a sound cue, call that sound cue grass, so on and so forth. Do gravel next, sound cue gravel, and then metal, sound cue metal, and wood, sound cue wood. And now if you were to hit play on one of these, you'll notice it will just randomly select one of the wave files within that sound cue. So we'll get a little bit of variation each time a sound plays. Once again, I'll hit save all. And the next thing we can do is go ahead and create an anim notify, which is what is going to actually play the sound effects. It's going to contain all the logic for our dynamic footsteps. And I'm just going to put it in the characters, mannequins, and anims folder. And in here, I'm just going to right click, create a new folder, and I'll just call it anim notify, if I can spell that correctly. Open this up, we can right click in here and create a new blueprint class. And if we drop down all classes here, we can search for anim notify and create a new anim notify. And I'll just call this an underscore footsteps and open this up. Now we're going to add this anim notify to all of our animations shortly. But basically what we can do and where we can set up all of the code for this anim notify is if we go to functions here and drop down override and override received notify. So this will fire whenever this notify is called from an animation. I'll just move this out here and disconnect the return node for now. And then we can go ahead and create the variables that we need. So I'm going to create one variable, and I'm just going to call it write ? And that will be a Boolean. And then you can click this little I to make this instance editable, or you can check instance editable over here in the details panel. And this is just because each time we add this anim notify to an animation, we can then select whether this Boolean is true or false. So if we want to make it a footstep for the right foot, we can just check this variable. And the other thing that we're going to want to select each time we call this anim notify from an animation is the type of footfall that we want, because that will dictate the volume, etc. of the sound effect that we want to play. So I'm going to add one more variable, and I'm just going to call it sfx index, and I'm going to make it an integer. And I'll also click this little I, or if you like, you can check instance editable in the details panel. Alrighty, let's hit compile and save, and let's start setting up this code. So I'm going to drag off of this mesh component here, because this is the skeletal mesh that the animation sort of belongs to or applies to. And this is very handy because we can actually get the location of our feet. So we can drag off of here and we can get socket location, and then we can drag off in socket name and get a select node. And if we plug in our right ? variable here, if right is true, then we want to get the location of ball underscore R. And if it's false, we want to get the location of ball underscore L. And just in case you're not using the mannequin, basically what you'd want to do is find your character's skeleton, and you'd want to find, what bone to use in the foot. So we're using the mannequin, so we're using the ball of the foot. And if I just click this little I up here and go to bones, I can select all hierarchy so I can see the entire skeleton. And then if I select this, you'll see it says foot underscore R. If I select this, it will say ball underscore R. So you just want to make sure you're using an appropriate bone from the skeleton that your character uses. And you want to make sure that the spelling of these bones is exactly correct in your logic right here, because you are literally naming the bone. This needs to be exactly the name of the bones you want to use. And basically what we're going to do is draw a line trace from these bones to the floor, and when it hits the floor, it will make a sound effect. So we can drag off the execution pin here, and we'll do a line trace by channel. And I'm just going to do this on the visibility channel. You can create your own trace channel if you like in the project settings, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to use this one. And the start of this line trace, I'm going to do just above these bones, and I'm going to draw the trace down below those bones. So if I drag off of here and I add, and I just add, let's say, 10 units on the z-axis, plug it into the start here, that means this trace will start 10 units above either the left ball or the right ball of the foot. And I can drag off of here and find a subtract, and I will subtract something like 50 units. It probably doesn't need to be quite this high, but I'm just going to subtract 50 units. So this trace is going to start 10 units above these bones and draw down to 50 units below them. On actors to ignore here, I'll drag off of here and make an array. And if you highlight this object, it says actor object reference. And what we can actually do is just drag off of the mesh component here and get the owner, get owner, and this will be the character blueprint. So we can plug that in, and then this will ignore the character that this is coming from. The next thing we'll want to do is, we'll only want to execute any further logic if this trace actually hits something. So we'll drag off of the return value here and press B to get a branch. And we'll also drag off of the out hit here and break hit result, because we're going to want to use a couple of these pins from the hit result to dictate our logic going forward. And if the trace does hit something, we can play a sound at location, play sound at location, and the location that we'll use is the location from the hit here, like so. And just to test, I'm just going to set this to sound cue underscore concrete that we created. I'll drop this down so we get a few more options here. And one of the basic things we can play with here is the volume multiplier. So I'll drag off the volume multiplier and I'll get a select node. And then this is where the SFX index comes into play. So I'll drag this onto the index here for our select node. And I'll add a couple of pins. I'm just going to create 4 options here, but you can create as many of these as you like, and you can dictate what happens in this logic based on something like this. It's a very, very scalable way to set this up, because you could also spawn, particle effects like a little puff of dust or something like that. And you could even add options to this for like a double jump if you wanted something different to happen during a double jump. And then when you add this anim notify to your double jump animation, you would just select that option, and then you could sort of tailor it to this, and you could have all of your logic in this one place here. But we're just going to do sound effects today, and I'm only going to use 3 of these, but I'll leave option 0 for, let's say, crouch walking or something like that. I'm not going to add crouch walking in this tutorial, but let's make the volume, something very low, like 0.1 or even 0.05. Depends on your actual wave file and how you play with the volume in the cue, but I'll make this 0.05. This will be walking, and I'll make it 0.25. This will be jogging. I'll make it 0.6. And this can be sprinting and or landing. Like a nice heavy footfall will play the sound effect at full volume here. And just before we add this to our animations, I also want to create a sound attenuation asset. And this allows us to have sort of spatial sound and have it, only reach so far. And I'm just going to create one of these for now, but in a moment, I'll show you how to also change this depending on whether, which one of these options you're using. So for example, you can have crouch walking or slow walking have a much closer fall off than sprinting or landing or something like that, so that your crouch walking can only be heard from a closer distance. So I'll head back out and I'll go down to my sound effects folder, and I'm just going to create this in here by right clicking and going to audio and sound attenuation. And I'll just call this, I'll call it SA for sound attenuation _ strong. So these will be the settings for the sounds that we can hear nice and close. I'll open this up, and I'm not going to go in depth into changing the attenuation settings in here. I'm just going to change the inner radius and the fall off distance here. So I'll make this something like 1000 units, which is 10 meters. And I'll make the fall off distance something like 1800, so about 18 meters. And I'll save this, and back in my anim notify here, I'll drop down attenuation settings and select my sound attenuation strong. And now we can go ahead and add this anim notify to some animations so we can test it out. So I'm going to compile and save that. And then I'm going to go to mannequins, anims, and unarmed. And I'll first go into these walk animations. Now we've got all these different directional walk animations. I'm not going to go into adding the anim notify to all of these. I'm just going to do the forward animations so that you can see that this is working. So I'll go ahead and pause this animation, and you can see we've already got some anim notifiers here that are built into the template, but we're not going to use those. We're going to use the one that we've just created, and I'm actually just going to create a new notify track by clicking track here, add notify track, and I'll just leave it named 2, and this is the track that we're going to add our anim notify to. And we can use these notifiers here as kind of reference points, so I'm just going to add them pretty much in the exact same position as these ones here. I'll right click on this notify track 2 right here, add notify, and add our AN footsteps that we created. And just to do this as quickly as possible, what I'll do is I'll select this one and I'll drop down default here in the details panel. I'm going to check right because this is a right footfall. And I'm also going to select the index that I want to use for this type of footfall. So this is walking, and this is going to be 1 for me. And now that this is set, I'm going to click on this anim notify, press Ctrl C to copy, and then I'm going to right click anywhere else that I want it and paste like so. And that way I only have to do those settings once. I'll also paste one right here at left, and I'll select that one. I'll uncheck right there because this one is a left footfall. I'll Control C that, and I'll right click over here and paste one there as well, and I'll just double check that those settings are correct. So all of these will have the SFX index of 1, and it goes right, left, right, left. Very good. We can save this and close this, and now we want to find our jog forward animation. So I'm going to add to jog and jog forward, and I will pause this animation, and I just need to drop down this little track drop down here and add a new notify track. I'll leave it named as 2, and then I'm just going to paste these in at the exact same positions as these other notifiers once more. So I can right click here and paste this one once more because I've already copied it, and then this one I'll set to right, and the sound effects index for jogging here is going to be 2. So I'll change this to 2. So this one's set to right, sound effects index 2. I can then Control C that, and I'll paste it anywhere where there is a right foot notify, like so. I'll also paste one right here, but I'll change this one to right being false and leave SFX index as 2. Control C that, and then right click here, paste one here, and also paste one here. And by the way, you can see these notifiers working right here in the animation. If you drag this, it will play the sound effect at each notify. And actually this has just shown me that in my anim notify, I forgot to change draw debug type to for duration. And I definitely want to do this just so I can see that the line trace is doing, you know, what I expect it to do. So I can now do this, and you'll even see the line trace in the animation coming off the correct foot like so. Very nice. I can save this and close this, and I can give this a test now. I'm going to hit play, and it's only playing the concrete cue, which sounds very repetitive and kind of annoying. Almost sounds like a really bad techno beat, but that is working. You can actually see the traces playing there. Very, very nice. We can also check that the volume is changing for the walk animations by putting in a very quick and hacky way to change the walk speed. So I'm going to go down to third person and blueprints, BP third person character. And just here in the event graph, I will right click and find the left control key. I'll grab the character movement component and I'll set max walk speed. I'll duplicate this and make sure the character movement component's plugged into the target. And on pressed, I'm going to change the max walk speed to 300, which is the speed that the walk animation is in the blend space in the template. And then I will change it back to 600, which is the default when I release the left control. And now, if I press the left control, that volume is changing. You can even drop this volume for index 1 even lower if you wanted to, really see a difference and accentuate it. There you go. That is much quieter. And I'll leave it like that just so it's accentuated, and we can sort of, as we test it going forward, we'll be able to distinctly hear a difference. Nice. The next thing I want to do is I want to change the sound cue based on which surface I am walking on or running on. And this is a little tedious, but I'll try and punch through this and show you as quickly as possible. Basically, what we need to do is fill out an enumeration in the project settings that lists our different surface types that we want to have in our game. So I'm going to go to Edit and Project Settings. And if I search for surface, you'll see down here under engine physics, we've got physical surface, and then we've got this list of surface types. And we just need to type in some names of the surface types that we want to have in here. So the first one I'm going to have is concrete, and then I'll do grass, wood, metal, and gravel. Whoops, gravel. Nice. So you just need to name these in here. That's all you need to do in the project settings. But what you'll also need to do is sort of attribute those to some physical materials. So I might just create a new folder in the content folder here, and I'll just call it PhysMats for physical materials. And in here, we're going to want to right click and go to physics and create a new physical material. Select physical material and click select. And the ones built into the engine, the naming convention is PhysMat, but there's some existing ones in there that I'm going to want to differentiate from. So I'm just going to call mine PM for physical material underscore concrete, if I can spell concrete. And then I'm going to duplicate that, and I'll rename this one to wood. Duplicate this one, name this one gravel, duplicate this one, and call this one metal. And I think the only one I'm missing is grass. And now that these physical material assets have been created, we need to open up each one. So I'll open concrete, and down here in surface type, you'll find the surface types that we specified in the project settings. So this one's concrete. I'll change this to concrete, and I'm going to go through all of these. Grass, change it to grass. Gravel, change it to gravel. Metal is metal, and wood is wood. And now that we've created all those and set them up, I'm going to hit save all. And the next thing we need to do is set these within these different materials right here. So I'm going to find my materials down here, my Megascans folder. I've got concrete first. I'll open up concrete, and down here, the physical material, we can search for PM underscore, and I'll change this to PM concrete. But I'm actually going to Control C this PM underscore so I don't have to keep typing it. I'll select PM underscore concrete for my concrete, and need to go through all of these. Gravel, change this to gravel. Grass to grass. Metal to metal. And wood to wood. And once again, I've changed a bunch of assets, so I'll save all again. I don't want to lose that progress. Like I said, this is quite tedious, but that's all done now, and literally any object that I put this wood material on will then act like wood when I walk on it, which is pretty cool. I'm just going to undo that. But with that being said, I should also point out that there is a physical material override for objects. So for example, this material here has the gravel physical surface type assigned to that material. But in the details panel with this object selected, if I search for fizz, might need to scroll down a bit here, you'll see physical material override. So this is also an option for you if you want to override the physical material. So, you know, maybe you don't want it to be default or something. You can override whatever's inside the material. You can override it right here, just FYI. Now that this is done, we can go back into our anim notify here, and we can drag off of FizzMat here from the hit results and get surface type. And this will return an enumeration of the surface type that you've actually hit. We can drag off of the sound here and get a select node, plug surface type in here, and just like that, you've got all of your different surface types here, and you can select a different sound asset depending on the surface type. So default, I'm actually going to set this to concrete, and once again, I'm going to Control C this naming convention here so I don't have to keep typing it. And basically what this means is if we walk on something that doesn't have, you know, one of these physical materials set, it will just play whatever you put in here. So I'm just going to select concrete for this one, and concrete is obviously concrete. Grass, we're going to select our grass sound cue. Wood is wood. Metal is metal. And gravel is gravel. So as I said, a little bit tedious, but that's all set up now. So we can test that and hit play. Got gravel, wood, metal. This one's gravel again. Got grass here. These grass sound effects are really not good, but for purposes of testing, it's fine. And when there's nothing, it will just play concrete. And we can also press Control to walk. Very nice. That's working very well indeed. And guys, the beauty of this system is that you don't even have to do any replication for multiplayer, because it's animation driven and animation blueprints sort of work in multiplayer. They don't need to be replicated. It's all done locally. And please let me know in the comment section, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see absolutely no reason why you don't actually need to replicate this and go via the server. You can save the bandwidth and just do it this way, and I don't really see any reason why not. But just to demonstrate that this does work, you know, for other players and enemy AIs and whatnot, I'm going to set up an enemy AI to sort of roam around the level so we can sort of hear the sound attenuation at work. And just before we do that, I'm actually going to create another sound attenuation asset that's going to be a sort of a light sound attenuation for the higher volume sounds like sprinting and jumping and whatnot. And while I'm at it, I will add the anim notify to the jumping and landing animations. So I'm just going to browse to our sound attenuation asset here, and then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll call this one SA Light, and open this up. And I'm just going to make the inner radius something like 1200 and the fall off distance 2400. So it's going to have a slightly larger inner radius, and the fall off distance is going to be slightly larger as well, so that you can sort of hear the sprinting and landing sound effects from further away. So now that that's done, we can save and close that, and I'll close the other one as well. And in our animation notify here, what we're going to do is just drag off of the attenuation settings and once again get a select node, and I'll just plug this sound effects index straight into this one as well, and I'll add a couple of options. And for our option 0 and option 1, we're going to have strong attenuation, and then for our option 2 and option 3, we'll have light attenuation. Nice. And now what we can do, instead of sort of testing in a sort of a replication sort of setup here, what I'll do is I'll just create an enemy AI to sort of walk around the map, because it works exactly the same. It's just you know, a different character controlled by a different controller, and it works exactly the same. So it's absolutely fine for testing. So what I'll do is go to blueprints and my BP third person character here. I'll right click on this and create a child blueprint class, and I'll just call this BP underscore enemy. And I'm going to drag one of these BP enemies out into the level like so. This guy is going to have all of the same logic as my BP third person character, but with some extra AI logic built in. So I'm going to open up BP enemy and head to the event graph, and I'll right click in some empty space, create a custom event. I'll call it roam at random. Whoops, didn't spell roam correctly, cannot spell today. Roam at random. And then on begin play, what I'll do is I'll right click here and I will add a call to parent function, just in case you've got some begin play stuff in your third person character that you want to execute. And then let's just call roam at random on begin play. Each time this event is called, I'm going to select a random walk speed as well, so that we have our different volume sound effects. So I'll grab my character movement, I'll set max walk speed, plug this in here, and then I'll get a select float, and I'll either make the walk speed 300, so half, which is the walking speed, or the default, which is 600. And I'll choose these based on a random Boolean. So I'll grab a random bool, and this will choose a different one sort of each time at random. The next thing I'll do is I'll get AI move to the pawn here. We can get a reference to self, and the destination we'll drag off of here, and we'll get a random reachable point in radius. Get random reachable point in radius. The origin, we can get actor location. The radius, I'm going to make something like 30 meters, so 3,000. And we don't need to touch these other pins here. We can leave those as is, but I will change the acceptance radius to something like 50. And then on success or fail, we'll set a delay of 1.5 seconds on success or on fail. And after 1.5 seconds, we'll just call this again. Roam at random. So on begin play, our AI will choose a random walk speed, walk to a random location, and once it reaches it or fails to reach it, it will wait 1.5 seconds, and then it will do it all again and walk somewhere else. And the only other thing that we need for this to work, I'll compile and save that, is a nav mesh bounds volume. So we'll click the cube plus icon up here, and we'll search for nav and get a nav mesh bounds volume, put it right in the middle of the map, and then we will just scale this up on the X and Y, and I'll scale it up a little bit on the Z as well. And if we press P, we will get a preview of that. And there we go. That's everywhere he can walk. Now I've got these points up here, which he can't actually get to. So I might just scale this down on the Z a little bit until those ones go away. There we go. If we hit play now, our AI is moving around, and that is definitely louder when he's running, and it's working correctly on the different physical surfaces. We just need him to go a little bit further away so we can hear if the attenuation is working correctly. And it is. That got very quiet, and now we can't hear him at all. Very nice. Pretty cool, huh? The only other thing that I forgot to do was add the anim notify to the jump and land animations. So let's go back up to our mannequins folder and anims, unarmed, and jump. And in here, we've got the jump and land animations. I'll open up jump. And here, it's just a good idea to put one sort of at the start. So, you know, that the players can't just jump silently. So we'll just add one to the anim notify track 1 here. I'll add notify, an footsteps. And this one, I'll just leave as left foot. And I'll change the sound effects index to 2, which is our jogging one, to make it a little bit heavier on the heavy side. But we'll also add one to the land animation, so I'll open up land. And also this one near the start here, we'll add our notify, and I'll leave it as left, but I'll change the sound effects index to 3 for our heaviest footfall here. So now if we hit play and we jump, and the only problem is here, it's not really playing the jump sound. And I believe it's because the line trace is missing. It doesn't look like the jump line trace is even playing. The animation notify is even playing on the jump. And that may be because of the blend time into jump. So we might just want to move this up a little bit to like the 4th frame or something. And you might actually want to do that with your land animation as well. So if you haven't blended into the animation yet, it won't register the anim notify. So you want to be wary of that. And now that is working. The only other thing that you'd probably want to be wary of, especially if you were actually trying to make a multiplayer game, is that you couldn't do something like this where you just crept forward and it doesn't play the anim notify because he's not actually going into the animation there. So one way that you could do that is you could have a start to walk or a start to run animation and put it very, very early on in there. But I leave that up to you because this is really all we set out to do today. That attenuation is working quite nicely. Gets quieter as the character gets further away. And we've got the different sound effects based on what surface type they are running on. Really, really cool stuff. And that's it, guys. If this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.